Will the IRS waive interest and penalties? So the question we get asked a lot is, we'll have a taxpayer who owes $50,000, $100,000, $1 million in liability. And the taxpayer, our client, doesn't object to the actual tax liability. Well, some do. But most of them object to the interest and penalties that get tacked on to their liability, which can add tens or hundreds of thousands or even more than $1 million to the liability. So with interest on tax liabilities is defined and set by a statutory rate. So absent some really critical error with the IRS or the way that they calculate the liability, which is not to say the IRS doesn't make mistakes, they do. But absent some sort of serious error, you're probably not going to get the interest waived. And one of the revenue officers that I work with frequently says the interest is what the interest is. And that's true. And the flip side of that is the federal interest rate for tax liabilities is, generally speaking, pretty low. Now, the penalty portion of the liability usually is pretty stiff. However, penalties can get waived under certain circumstances. What you need to waive a penalty is something called reasonable cause. And a reasonable cause is essentially a good faith excuse for why the tax debt was incurred. And we can spend a lot of time talking about reasonable cause. But if you believe that you have reasonable cause and there's a genuine reason on why this debt was incurred and not paid on time, then I'd encourage you to talk to a tax attorney like myself or a qualified representative to determine whether or not you have reasonable cause and what the proper course of action is for getting the IRS to waive those penalties.